Whenever I go to a new gig and work at a new conference with a new group, I'm trying my hardest as quickly as possible to learn the dynamics of the group and the profession. So I spoke at the Management Accounting Forum. Before that day, I had no idea about management accounting. I did the research. As you know, I do an extraordinary amount of research for my gigs. And the presentation I did for you took 86 hours on average. The initial presentation, 86 hours of research, choreography, studying things, learning the room, learning who's at the table, that sort of thing. So, it's an extraordinary thing. So I'm still, walking the talk, if you will, because I'm deeply conscious of when I don't hit the mark, it impacts my career. So again, that's important for me. So yeah, that's the long-winded answer to that question.
It's a very long-winded answer, AJ. Yeah, but I think there's some good points there. I wanted to ask you, there's another question that came through on that night, and I think this is a really interesting one. And I think a lot of HR professionals listening right now are going to lean in on this question. So how do you influence leaders that are operating under a directive from their board? And the example that was given was saying the board says they have to cut costs by 30%, and they're blindly going down the reduced headcount route, which you sort of talked about previously. How do you influence them to take different avenues when they are operating under pressure themselves? So it's essentially an extension of what you were saying just before, but more that second part of how do you influence them to take different avenues when they are operating under pressure themselves? It's a really interesting question.
So the challenge with that is, if you're trying, this goes back to what I said about the point of impact. If you're trying to influence at the point of impact, it's not going to work, right? No matter what you say, no matter what you do, it isn't going to work. That's why you have to build the impact and influence before you need someone to make a decision. And this comes down to the underlying sentiment of trust, because trust has shifted. Previously, trust used to be institutionalized trust. So if you released messages and belonged to, government, business, or media, back in the day, people would listen to these messages because we believed as a society, these institutions had our best interests at heart. And over time, that's eroded. And, when I do the presentation, I put up the data where that shows trust has eroded. Like, people trust messages and people coming from government, large business, and media, So it's being replaced with peer-to-peer credibility, which is why you'll have a government minister announce a fiscal policy, but everyone's listening to someone on TikTok, and making strong financial decisions based on the TikTokers, because that TikToker is showing up without, any traditional agendas. And they're showing up over time. So they've released like 100 videos or whatever, and every time that person pops up, over time you build a stronger unconscious relationship with them. So going back to answering this question, and also I should have explained right at the start that the way I answer questions is there's a lot of context, and then the idea hits. So come on the journey with me, right? And what this is, so, for that leader impacting in that moment, they're going to lose no matter what they do.